You see, something's going to happen.
What? What's going to happen?
Something wonderful.
What?
I understand how you feel. You see, it's all very clear to me now.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, we got a bunch of guests here and a very exciting book and stuff to talk about. Should be really interesting and maybe out there. And that's exactly what the show's about. So, but before we introduce these guests, let me introduce the other rejects. Judith, what is going on? How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me again.
Of course.
I'm the Loon, Judith Swanson. Welcome to our guests today. I'm looking forward to the topic. And you could find me on YouTube and on X as The Loon. On X, I'm at The Loon 50. And I deal with more of meditation and self-development. And that's it. And thank you again.
Awesome. No, thank you. I appreciate you making it again. I appreciate it. And Robbie Marks, sir, please let everyone know where they can find all your amazing work, please.
Yes, thanks for having me on, Nick. It's always a great time to come hang out. And this is a topic that I'm extremely interested in, just in regard to consciousness and, the medicine for the mind, body, and soul. I am an artist and illustrator. I do art for bands and festivals, different stuff like that. I've been in the industry about 35 years, and I come on to do this to have fun and talk about these different topics, from philosophy to esoterica. So thanks for having me on. And if anybody wants to check out my other stuff, you can check out my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up all my miscellaneous links and ways that you can get a hold of me. So thanks for having me on, Nick.
Oh, of course. Thank you for making it. And our guests are the co-authors of the 8 Circuit Ascension. That is a guide to metaprogramming the multidimensional self. And that is written by Douglas S. Wingate and Dr. Rachel Turetzky. And we do have Dr. J. Brown, David J. Brown, who wrote the foreword. He is joining us, and he's wrote 20 other books and has done tons of interesting research. And together, they've taken the classic Leary and Wilson lineage idea and reframed it for a modern reader who's trying to do the real work. Understanding conditioning, navigating altered states, integrating big experiences, and if we're being honest, figuring out who's actually holding the keyboard inside of our head. We got the 3 of them, and I will start off with you, Doug. Please let everybody know what's up with you and where they can find all your business.
My name is Dr. Doug Wingate. I mostly work as integrative neurorehabilitation specialist. So I've been working in neurorehabilitation in a number of different realms for the last 15 years or so. I'm also a licensed psilocybin facilitator in the state of Oregon. So I've had the opportunity to legally facilitate hundreds of psilocybin journeys at this point. A lot of those have been working with people who have history of neurotrauma. So I focus and do research in psychedelic-assisted neurorehabilitation. In addition to being one of the co-founders of 8 Circuit Ascension, alongside Dr. Rachel and Dr. David, long-time interests in consciousness and self-development and psychonautics. So, pleasure to be here.
No, thank you. This is awesome. I really appreciate you all coming. And we got Dr. Rachel. What is going on?
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology with an emphasis in depth psychology and further training in psychedelic assisted therapy, and particularly, which is currently legal to work with ketamine assisted therapy. And just been really focusing the past couple of years as I work towards licensure, just working on these projects, really focusing on the 8 Circuit model and co-authoring the book and other projects with Dr. Doug and with David. Especially excited about, so we're working on the workbook currently for the main text, the 8 Circuit Ascension workbook, and then also an oracle deck based on the DMT entities and the 8 Circuit model.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Dr. J. Brown, sir, please.
I'm David J. Brown. I'm a writer, author, researcher. My background is in behavioral neuroscience. I was a researcher at New York University and the University of Southern California for a number of years. I did research into neophobia, which is the fear of novelty and electrical brain stimulation. And I'm also the author of 20 books about the evolution of consciousness. I've written books on lucid dreaming. I've written books on the DMT entity phenomena. I've written books on the interface between science and spirituality. Most recently, my book is the Illustrated Field Guide to the DMT Entities, which was a springboard for the project that I'm working on with Rachel for the past year, which is an oracle deck that utilizes the different entities that people encounter on their DMT journeys. And I worked with MAPS for a number of years, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, and also I worked for 5 years with British biologist Rupert Sheldrake about his research into the unexplained powers of animals, or the psychic power of animals.
That is awesome. Nice. I've tried to get that guy on the show so many times. He's told me no, and I keep trying every 6 months. He's going to get tired of hearing me ask him.
Yeah, he's very busy.
No, that's what he tells me. And I honestly believe that's the truth. I don't think he's just blowing me off. I think he's honestly busy. Yeah. That is awesome, man. I mean, some things I think I'd like to have you back on the show for some other topics you already mentioned. Great stuff. All right, so I guess I don't know. Like, maybe we'll go one at a time or something. But like, I guess Doug, like, what was it that? How did you find yourself getting into this?
Yeah, I originally got into like consciousness studies early on. So introduced to like Taoism and the Tao Te Ching in like 13, 14. And then around age 17 or so, ran across Robert Anton Wilson in Powell's books here in Portland. Just happened to run across looking through the metaphysics section, and Prometheus Rising was in there. And just pulled me in. I thumbed through it and got sucked in ever since. And read through that a number of times. And then I was very fortunate before Bob's passing to be involved in his Maybe Logic Academy when he started teaching online. So I had the opportunity to go through and work through the 8-circuit model with Robert Anton Wilson, which was a huge blessing and growth for me for sure. And then a couple years later, similar offering from Ansaro Ali based on the 8-circuit model as well through the Maybe Logic Academy. And then ultimately outside of that, I've done that training with him a few times before his passing. So it's been a long journey working with this kind of material, and always foundationally just super interested in kind of the range of human experience or how broad that experience can be and how we can continue to broaden it and better ourselves.
Thank you. And Dr. Rachel.
Yeah, so around like the early 2000s, I'd say, was the first time I came across the 8-circuit model. But also similar to Doug, early teen years, was really interested in consciousness studies and fell down the proverbial rabbit hole. Started experimenting with psychedelics and reading all kinds of spiritual literature, practicing all kinds of stuff. 8-circuit model was such a great tool for really organizing and understanding those experiences and different ideas. Also, so similar to Doug, I was able to take a course with Ansaro Ali when he had his 8-circuit brain course. And so just working in the field of psychedelics, though, felt like this was just such an important tool that kind of, because of Leary's reputation, just kind of fell into the fringes, and really wanted to bring it out to the mainstream because I found it so personally helpful, and this is great framework could be used and help so many people.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Great stuff. And David, please.
Let's see. How did I get involved in this? I guess I've been interested in dreams and altered states of consciousness ever since I was a child, really. And I had my first LSD trip when I was 16 years old, and a few days later had my first lucid dream spontaneously. And it was like right around that time when I was 16 and tripping and first exploring these psychedelic states of consciousness that I came across Robert Anton Wilson's book, Cosmic Trigger.
Oh, yeah.
And that book really was a cosmic trigger for me. I mean, it's pretty much it mapped out my whole life, that book. Almost all the people that I've interviewed over the years and people I've worked with were people that I discovered through reading that book. And it sort of started me on this quest. That's how I got involved in neuroscience research. And I was very fortunate when I was in my mid-20s. I wrote a science fiction novel called Brainchild. And when I was still in the process of writing the book and I had just found a publisher, I went to a lecture that Robert Anton Wilson was giving in Santa Cruz, and waited for him after the lecture because I wanted to ask him if he could possibly consider writing a blurb for the back cover of the book. And I, to work up my courage, I was all starstruck, and I went up to meet him. And I said, I just finished this science fiction novel, and I was wondering if maybe you could possibly write a little blurb for the back cover. And he did not seem very enthusiastic. He kind of like as if I was like the 100th person that day who asked him for a back cover blurb. And I was feeling kind of embarrassed, but he said, just mail it to me. And he gave me an address to mail it to. And so I had my publisher, it was called New Falcon at the time. What are they called now? Original Falcon? They keep changing their name, but they were called New Falcon at the time. And they mailed my manuscript to Bob. And I was thrilled to discover that he wrote an 11-page introduction to the book. Not just a back cover blurb, but he was my hero, and having him do this was just it was just absolutely one of the most magnificent things that's happened in my life. And as a result of that, I went to go visit him when he was living in Los Angeles, and he invited me to come to his weekly gatherings. He did sort of book readings and discussion groups every week about his books, about other people's books, like James Joyce. And we would sometimes watch movies and talk about them. And I went to Bob's meetings once a week for about 20 years. So he became a very close friend of mine. And I was really fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time talking to Bob about philosophical ideas and creativity and politics and consciousness expansion and all those wonderful things. And I think he's truly one of the greatest geniuses that our species has produced. So it was through him that I discovered the Eighth Circuit model of the brain, of course. And the Eighth Circuit model, I think, is just, it's just the best psychological model to explain not only the mundane states of consciousness that everybody experiences, but also the higher states of consciousness. And it's based upon the law of octaves, which we see represented in the colors of the rainbow and the notes of the musical scale. And it was really Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson's stroke of genius to apply this to the evolution of consciousness and to human development. So I was thrilled. Rachel and I were experimenting with some altered states of consciousness a few years ago, and it was during that experience that we thought we really should, update this model and bring it up to date with modern neuroscience and with all the new breakthroughs and all the different fields of science that it has a relevance to, and that was the original inspiration for how this book originally came together.
That's awesome. Robbie or Judith, was there anything you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you could explain, because not all of us are familiar with the Eighth Circuit model that you're speaking of. If you could just expand on that for us.
You want me or Doug or who or Rachel?
Anyone.
Well, the Eighth Circuit model, like I said, it's based on the law of octaves, which was originally developed from chemistry. That there's basically 8 different chemical groups that repeat or that break into different types of chemical formations, and we've people have been able to see that same pattern is represented in the colors of the rainbow: red, orange, green, yellow, indigo, violet, in the musical scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and it's represented in virtually every aspect of nature. And when you apply it to psychological development, there's basically 8 different stages, and those are the survival stage, the emotional stage, the intellectual stage, the social sexual stage, the neurosomatic or aesthetic stage, neuroelectrical, neurogenetic, and then neuroatomic. And as you escalate up the scale, there are greater degrees of freedom and greater degrees of sensory exchange. So it's really just an incredibly brilliant model for being able to help understand psychedelic experiences in particular. For me, at least, that was why I was so drawn to it, because the stages are just so they're just so carefully expressed, and they sort of fit into this wonderful sequential model. But maybe Doug or Rachel can add to that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, David. That's, I guess, just absolutely true. And another way that we've come to kind of discuss this as well is sort of different types of intelligence that each human has the capacity to tap into or navigate. And so, as David mentioned, we have kind of the bodily intelligence or somatic intelligence. We have emotional intelligence. We have rational intelligence. We have social intelligence, sensory intelligence, where we become consciously able to work with and alter our sensory experiences and expand that. Meta intelligence, where we become more self-aware and self-conscious around how our thinking patterns and our belief systems. And once we become more aware of that, we have the opportunity to, again, take conscious control and alter those in a way that might be more efficient for us. And then there's a sort of a collective intelligence where we have a lot of like Jungian archetype type material and epigenetic material that kind of bonds us all as a species. And then there's unitive intelligence, which is a lot of the transpersonal, mystical, non-dual, ego transcendent states that can come out of the psychedelic states, or other practices that lend themselves to these altered states of consciousness or these types of intelligences. So the model works as a great framework to be able to have an informed discussion around that, and an understanding of kind of where people are operating, or where people maybe want to do personal work, or might be tapping into with their altered states.
And also I would add just how we work with the model as quote unquote metaprogrammers. So that would be circuit 6. So that's the intentional, exploring what are your belief systems, how have you been conditioned throughout your life, and then being able to question and potentially alter those intent by choice with intention, and trying to what is your authentic self, so this also fits in with this audience as the cultist, where you're trying to decondition your pre-programs. So that also can lend itself to healing, but also the development of these higher senses. So in terms of, astral projection or psychic phenomena and gnosis, the experience of the holy guardian angel and so on. So that circuit 6 is sort of stepping into the role of a magician, and, again, working with both then the lower circuits and also kind of the access point between the lower and the upper circuits.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of our conversations when it comes to the use of ritual or ceremonial practices or occult practices, it kind of falls into and can be looked at from that perspective of metacognition or meta intelligence as ways to sort of step out of or introduce states where we can become more self-aware and more self-empowered. And so that's kind of how all of those fit into this. And Rachel and my work is really focused on that meta-programming or that meta-intelligence. And so it's really interesting to have a conversation with people around how that's been not overtly used, but has been used within these practices, cross-culturally for centuries, millennia.
So I've got a question. I've got a copy of a monograph of Timothy Leary's Exopsychology, where he talks about, is this the same type of system?
It is the same system. It is the same model. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Timothy Leary's work, Exopsychology, was his I guess main book that it really focused in on this model, and it took the perspective of bioevolution. So it was taking a look at the evolution of consciousness on a species type level. And so, yeah, that's exactly it. And then Robert Anton Wilson's work with Prometheus Rising brought that more into an individual development in individual psychology. And then Antero Ali's work brought that into sort of a more personal ritual type dynamic.
All right. Anybody else got anything before I go on?
I do have a question, and I hope I'm not going off the topic. I did mention I was going to ask this, but in your studies, while you were conducting your research for this, did you also deal with the veterans dealing with PTSD, and if you did, how did it affect them, and what kind of results did you get from that?
So as we mentioned, I work with veterans a fair amount with PTSD, and Rachel might be able to speak to her work with MAPS. In that, I'm not sure how much detail you want to get into that, but Rachel, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
With respect to the 8 circuit model, we haven't done any work personally with the 8 circuit model in veterans, but yeah, so I have been working with MAPS for the past 13 years or so, working on their MDMA PTSD studies. And to qualify for those studies, it was like people who had like such severe PTSD that basically they tried so many different modalities and really nothing was working. And so the MDMA trials were amazing because what they found was that like about, I forget which phases was which, but like one of the phase 1, I think, was about 76% or so of the participants weren't even diagnosed with PTSD anymore, and somewhere in that range, for phase 2, it was just really unfortunate. There's like been a bump in the road to getting MDMA officially legalized, at least for psychedelic assisted therapy at this point, but there's just so much amazing research that MAPS had done that just shows how it's been life-changing for so many people. So hopefully moving forward, they can figure out all these little things that the FDA wants changed, but because there's so many more people that it could be helping, but we'll see.
I think it's interesting when you go back and you look in history in regard to Roman history and the Kakion and how everyone participated in the mysteries. It was the idea of knowing thyself and coming into and having these certain societal like understanding with the self and the society. And then you move that up into like Timothy Leary doing the alcoholics and the various addictions with LSD treatment in the prisons. And he had like an 85% success rate, when you step back and look at the program as a whole. So I think there's a lot of fundamental sound value in the use of these substances for the purpose of helping to help people step back from themselves and be able to see things in a larger perspective, so that they're not so directly tied in with the experience of the self in certain ways, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and Rachel's very familiar with that study. Do you remember what the percentage was?
I want to say it was about two-thirds.
2/3, yeah. I thought it was 80-something percent.
It was
if I remember.
high.
Yeah,
it was very impressive.
Yeah.
You mentioned FDA. Is there restraints with your progress to make adjustments?
So it's MAPS. So they've been doing these studies for when did they start? David, do you know when
Years ago.
Maybe around 2005 or 2007, somewhere around there, I think was the beginning of the MDMA PTSD studies. Yeah.
But they got, and at one point it was in 2017, they got fast tracked because there was just such compelling evidence that, this was going to be this breakthrough treatment. And so phase 3 was put on this fast track for approval. And then I guess there's just these, the way that they went about the study design where it was considered, it wasn't as like scientifically repeatable because it's like a very non-directive approach. So just things that they have to tweak in terms of the therapy itself, because the FDA tends to deal with, Food and Drug Administration, right? But now you're bringing in therapy. And then there was some ethical things that they had concerns about. So there's all these like little things that it's not about the efficacy of the treatment itself, but just complying with certain regulatory standards that they want to see. Unfortunately, that impedes other people outside of these studies from getting this treatment, but it is extremely promising, and hopefully we can move forward with that sooner.
Yeah, and we're sitting at a pretty similar place with psilocybin right now. It's going through a couple different phase 3 trials, and there's expectation and talk about that going before the FDA for consideration for rescheduling within as soon as the next 6 months or a year or something like that. That's mostly focused on depression. And then, if that goes forward, and it's similar to with the MDMA, it's been fast tracked. It's been considered a breakthrough therapy in both of the phase 3 trials that are looking at getting finished up pretty quickly. Then that would certainly open it up to more research, more access, and being able to focus on PTSD as well, which there's ample preliminary research showing that, and then hopefully getting more funding toward specific populations like working with veterans. But it's kind of one of those one step at a time type things, especially when it comes to the federal level, the FDA.
Well, and like you said, the federal level, but also there's different states, obviously in Oregon. So psilocybin, he legally facilitates psilocybin journeys for folks. And then New Jersey, I believe, wants to legalize psilocybin for therapeutic purposes. I think Texas, was it, that has legalized iboga?
I think that New Jersey just did, actually. I think they just did, yeah.
And Colorado and Michigan as well are also.
Yeah, New Mexico has also passed legislation. So, it's kind of like state by state. I've been really fortunate here in Oregon. We've been able to do legal facilitation for about 3 years. And it's been incredible. We've had people fly in from all over the country or all over the world internationally to come in and do journeys, because it's one of the few places that you can legally access it in a true framework or structure of support.
Yeah.
That's an Occult Rejects field trip right there.
Come on over.
Oh man, that'd be fucking wild. I did want to ask, what is you might have mentioned it maybe within explaining certain things, but I would just like to ask this in a question. What is a circuit in practical terms?
A circuit is, originally it was referred to as the 8-circuit model, and then over the years, as authors and people have been working with the material, it's kind of used different terminology as well. So it's been called the 8-circuit model. It's been called 8 dimensions of mind. We've called it the 8 dimensions of self, or 8 dimensions of intelligence. And so circuit originally, I think, well, David might be able to correct me here, but that was more of Timothy Leary's original verbiage in terms of brain circuitry. So, a lot of the conversation around the time that this was originally coming out was there's a big boom in understanding of the human brain and preliminary neuroscience. And so there were a lot of metaphors flying around correlating or talking about the brain as sort of a biocomputer, John Lilly's work, Metaprogramming, the human biocomputer. So I think he was born out of that. And I find it really interesting, working in neuroscience myself, is that we've kind of almost come around full circle, where we have an understanding that it's not exactly operating the way that it used to be looked at, like a computer, but there are circuits, or there are large-scale brain networks that are operating, and many of these have to do with different neurotransmitter tracks and things like that. And so it's kind of like come back into the conversation in terms of neural circuitry. But David, would you say that's correct? Or?
Yeah, that sounds right. A circuit, he's basically on an electrical circuit, like in an electrical system. It's like a looping electrical flow of current. And he was trying basically Tim was trying to use the latest technology, which basically was the computer as a metaphor. John Lilly was doing the same thing with the programming and metaprogramming, the human biocomputer. There's been kind of throughout the evolution of psychology, the latest technology is sort of always what they base the brain or the mind on. Originally, if you look in old psychology textbooks, when I was a kid, I remember there was they used the telephone model, telephone operating system, and before that they used the kind of Freud used the steam engine as the metaphor for how the brain and the mind work. So that was the latest was the computer, and then kind of virtual reality, but it was sort of an attempt to use the latest technology as a metaphor for understanding the most complex system that we know, the brain, which is really it's way more complex than a computer. And whatever our next technology that we develop, we'll probably use that as a metaphor, because the brain is not a computer, but it functions in many ways like a computer if you want to use that metaphor.
I've actually already seen an article recently referencing AI as being the new model. We're finding that this is how the brain works. So,
yeah.
Sure.
What do you think is the biggest misconception people have about psychedelic therapy versus psychedelic coaching and integration?
I think the biggest misconception is that psychedelics are fun. when it's really a lot of work, and it's not always fun, and it's often scary, and you have to. It certainly can be fun, but I think that's a misconception that's sort of in the public mind, is that people use these things just for fun and recreation. When you use them for therapy, it's really it's confronting the darkest parts of yourself and a lot of the things that you didn't know were there. So it's definitely not necessarily always fun.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. I found that to be a semi-common comment after people come in and do sessions with us, is that they were expecting lots of giggle fests and rainbows, and it's not always that. So I've definitely, some people do have those experiences, and that's wonderful, and it's full bliss the entire time, and then often it's a lot of deep, hard work that they're working through, bits of their psyche, parts of themselves that they don't or haven't given attention to for a variety of different reasons. And so it's definitely a fairly common comment that we'll get, is that it's a lot of work.
This kind of gets into the idea of the chapel perilous, in regard to going through that phase of the distinction between knowing and insanity.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with the idea of chapel perilous is a descriptor that's used in the Eighth Circuit model language. I think Bob used it first. And David, I know that you can probably speak to the story of why he's used that. But it's something that's had different terms in different practices over and over again as people are going through this sort of path of self-awareness or self-growth. And so, the dark night of the soul, crossing the abyss, the Negredo stage, all of these things. Chapel perilous is kind of another term that's used to speak to this period of time where there can be significant destabilization or de-identification with self. And so it can be a really difficult phase to navigate when you start breaking out of some of the rigid thought patterns that we've become so used to in navigating the world and opening our perspective to much larger concepts beyond just our individual self or beyond the personal ego. And so, yeah, that can be a big part of the journey for sure.
Right.
I could just add that the Chapel Perilous, it's a term that comes from King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And the Chapel Perilous was what you enter when you're sort of going through an initiation into a higher order. And it was Robert Anton Wilson's, stroke of genius to use that term to describe, the dark night of the soul, or these periods of chaos between, one level of understanding and a higher level. And it's sort of, I think it's a very noble and romantic way of saying, that you're fucking going crazy and you don't know what the hell is going on. But calling it Chapel Perilous gives it this kind of, noble kind of air to it.
That's
True.
Yeah, and also Stanislav Grof and a lot of his research with psychedelics, he talked about spiritual emergencies, and he has a whole book on spiritual emergencies, and that would also very well fit into a lot of what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have any other questions?
I have a question, because it sounds like the book itself is guiding you through this, but do you recommend having a certified therapist go through this with you, or can you just do it on your own as a solo thing?
So we've written the material with different audiences in mind, and it's material that a lot of individuals have navigated on their own as they're so motivated. Some of the earlier works, Prometheus Rising, has a number of exercises that you work with throughout the book geared toward working with that as an individual. So if you're a self-motivated psychonaut and really interested in your own personal journey, it's accessible in that way. The workbook that we're finishing up is intended to be much more geared toward that, but also a complement where you may be working with certified practitioners, professional therapists who are familiar with the model and can be helpful guideposts, or be in a position to kind of figure out where might be the best starting point or where to focus. And so that can be an incredible resource to have a professional who's versed in that. But we know that there are a lot of psychonauts out there that do their own self-exploration, and we also wanted to allow that material to be accessible to that audience too.
Thank you. All right, I got a question for you. When people come out of a big session with like cosmic downloads or whatever they call them, what's your process for grounding it without dismissing it? Like, how do you
without dismissing it?
Yeah.
So at least I can speak to the way that I work with when people have those type of situations where they have the big cosmic downloads or large epiphanies that can sometimes be destabilizing or just really hard to process. They're in the moment. And so something that I emphasize for a lot of people is that you don't need to make meaning of it right away. It's okay to sit with that material and see what grows out of it. You can consider that experience a catalyst or a planting of a seed that then, if you give it the right environment, has the opportunity to continue to grow and expand. And so when I'm working with somebody, we want to kind of figure out how much of that we want to leave open and how much grounding might be really helpful if they are feeling very destabilized, if they're having a trouble sort of finding themselves again, or finding a grounding. So we take into account how much we want to keep open and keep kind of soft boundaries around. So there are ways to work with that. You know, if somebody has a big cosmic download about familial or transgenerational trauma or entity encounters or something like that, that's where we would bring in exercises or integration practices that are much more open in terms of the way that they work. So it would be something like art-based or archetypal type integration. We do collage making or music making and things like that as a way to sort of explore that territory without locking it into defined meaning. At the same time, if somebody is feeling really destabilized and like disattached from their body, they're having a hard time bringing themselves back in the body, then we would take into consideration other parts of the 8 circuit model where we would focus on like circuit 1, the somatic experience, the somatic intelligence, and do exercises that really focus in on increasing in interoception, so an awareness around your body and what's going on. So conscious breathing, paying attention to your heart rate, doing things that literally ground you. So going out and doing horticulture therapy or gardening or just touching the ground, working with water. If somebody has a difficult time in putting their experience into words, then you can focus more on like journaling and what would be considered circuit 3 material. Whereas if there's more of an emotional dysregulation or a hard time knowing how you feel about the experience or attaching or processing emotions through that, then you can focus more on what would be considered circuit 2 material, focused on the emotional intelligence. So it's one of those things that really can be different for everybody depending on where they're at and what's going to be most supportive for them to work through that process in a meaningful way without meaning making too quickly and pulling somebody out of the potency of that experience.
Is that something that you've come across? Well, not often, but is that something you come across where sometimes people after these experiences might feel like they're kind of stuck in between both? You know, or like feel like they're not like, I think you kind of said it yourself, like they're almost like kind of not fully back yet.
Right. Go ahead.
Like, you know, so in general with psychedelic work, there's like preparation, the experience, and then integration. And in that kind of post-session, prior to integration, we really emphasize in the book we call the phase. And there's just, it's that sort of like you're coming back out of this experience, you potentially have these downloads or insights, and maybe some realizations, things you want to work on in integration to apply. But if you jump back out in the world, it's going to kind of be jarring potentially and jostle you, and you're going to lose that focus, like a dream. Like when you have a dream, if you don't write it down, sometimes it's like 5 minutes later even, you're just like, oh, what was that? And you forget it. So it's so important to take that time and that space to kind of stay with the experience, to kind of, you know, even if it was a negative experience, you know, or it felt like a very adverse or challenging experience, you know, could be a really fertile ground for healing and exploration. And so it's so important to have that, you know, that space to really explore those insights. And as Doug said, there's different activities that one can do to further that exploration as you're bringing that into your real life, grounding that into your quote unquote like consensus reality experience. So I'm sorry, do you want to continue with that, or?
Well, I'll just say that some of that work is also self-driven when I'm working with people in their integration of those experiences. So we have an integration packet then we send out afterward that has a variety of different approaches, and some of it is journaling exercises, some of it is art-based, some of it is movement-based, and then you know, one's own intelligence, you are sometimes intuitively drawn to a particular exercise, and that can be really helpful. So we do leave it open as well, and you know, a lot of the time we're kind of drawn to the different practices that are going to be most supportive to us.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else they wanted to ask?
Yeah, I was wondering in regard to these different separated substrates of the experience that you go through, can these be correlated with brainwave states that are specific, like transcendental meditation, or kind of things that we can see, like you were talking about how it overlays with frequency and color and sound, and even getting into the 7 chakras and the earth itself and the 7 continents. I mean, you just look at this reality is made up of 7s. So I'm just wondering, is there a direct correlation between brain wave states and these experienced psychological states that you go through?
It's definitely something that we explore in the book. In every section, as we're discussing a circuit, we discuss neurobiological correlates and where some of the research is around that, where some of the brain research is. So it becomes particularly interesting. It's pretty well established with the first 4 circuits. The first 4 circuits are what we consider the terrestrial circuits, or the mundane circuits of developmental psychology. They overlap very well with standard models of developmental psychology, and so they pretty much pin down a lot of the neurobiology as we grow and evolve into adulthood over time. And that's definitely in the book. We talk about that for sure, how different hormone systems come into play during different stages of development or critical windows of development. But it gets really interesting when we start talking about the upper 4 circuits, which are more of the transpersonal states. And so like circuit 5, that has a lot more to do with that conscious development of our sensory experiences, and is associated with blissful, rapturous states. They've found, there's dopamine correlates, but really strong correlates to the endocannabinoid system. And, I saw a paper fairly recently that was talking about runner's high. And circuit 5 is all about getting high in different ways, whether or not it's psychedelically induced or just different ways of living life where you feel this ecstatic state, this ecstatic sensory state. And for a long time, runner's high has been talked about as your endorphins. You get a lot of endorphins going, and you feel high off of that, and it feels great. But recent research has shown that it actually activates more of the endocannabinoid system. So our own body's cannabinoids that are activated during that sort of state. And with circuit 6, the metaprogramming, there's strong correlation to relationships to serotonin. So a lot of your classical psychedelics, for instance, that activate that work on the serotonin receptors. At the same time, there's a lot of neuroscience taking a look at the dynamic between different brain regions and networks, specifically the default mode network. And so there's a lot of research taking a look at that and how that changes during those type of experiences. Again, whether psychedelically induced or induced through ritual ceremonial practices, meditation practices, and things like that. There's a lot better understanding of the sort of neural correlates of meditation and what that actually does and allows to happen in our brain. And like with circuit 8, the most, I guess, expansive state that's associated with the non-dual states or those mystical experiences. They've been able to take a look at, while there's less people that tend to experience that, so there's less research on it. They are finding relationships to like waking dream states. So there's a lot of similarities between what our brain is doing during the REM cycle of sleep, the rapid eye movement phase of sleep, and then these unitive or transpersonal states. And so there is more and more hardline neuroscience that we're able to take a look at, and we definitely do in the book.
That's great.
David, do you want to add anything? Yeah,
I just wanted to add, it might be good to point out at this point so people kind of understand the different brain circuits better, is that one of the things that Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson did in developing their model of the 8-circuit brain is they correlated each circuit with a different drug. And by thinking about how the different drugs affect us, it can give you some insight into the different brain models. So, for example, the first circuit, which is all about survival and safety, is activated by opiates or opioid type drugs. The second circuit, the emotional circuit, is largely activated by alcohol, and the third circuit is largely which is the intellectual or rational mind circuit is activated by caffeine or amphetamines or cognitive enhancers or what people call smart drugs. The fourth brain circuit is activated by MDMA, or some people say Valium. And those are those first four circuits are basically the circuits that they say are for terrestrial organization, for living life on Earth and for surviving on Earth. And then the four higher circuits are they postulated for living beyond the Earth, for living in zero gravity, for living in a post-larval or post-human stage of existence that we're evolving to in the future. And they think that, you know, just being in zero gravity helps to activate these circuits. For example, Edgar Mitchell, I think he was the third or fourth man to walk on the moon. I interviewed him for one of my books, and he described how when he was in outer space, he had these very profound mystical and psychic experiences that almost sound like a profound LSD trip. Mm. And then, so the four higher circuits, the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth circuit, are activated by cannabis, by LSD, by magic mushrooms, ayahuasca. And then the highest circuit, the eighth circuit, is activated by ketamine or DMT. So that's why I discussed at the beginning how it was such an interesting map for being able to provide a framework for these different states of consciousness that different drugs produce. But all these different states are, of course, they're there because there's a circuit or there's a portion of the brain that corresponds to these, and they wouldn't, it's not like the drug is producing it. They're already lying there latent, and there's, of course, they can be accessed through many other different ways besides drugs, but drugs are a clear, easy way of understanding them. So anyway, I hope that provides some additional insight into this.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. That was great. How do you guys deal with, I think before, were you saying like you kind of classify like entities or deities? I wanted to ask, like, how do you treat entities and visions as literal, psychological, or both? Or how do you decide in session to like classify things?
I think David might have the expertise here.
Well, I mean, I don't work with people like Doug and Rachel do. I mean, I'm not a therapist. But I mean, I've just wrote a book on on cataloging the different entities that people report during mostly during their DMT or dimethyltryptamine experiences. And how do I treat them? I mean, I treat them like a mystery. They're a profound mystery. I don't think we know what they are. I mean, I explore different models for understanding them in the book and in my own research with it. That they could be just hallucinations. They could be projections of the mind. They could be archetypes from the collective unconscious. Or they could be independently existing entities that exist in alternative dimensions that we're really contacting. I mean, we don't really know, and we never may really know for sure, because I mean, how do I know you guys are conscious? I mean, how do I know anybody else is conscious, really? There's no scientific measure of consciousness. All we can do is base it on, our experience and how it seems to us. And I can tell you this, almost everybody who has a powerful experience with DMT, they come back and they say that was absolutely real. That was more real than this. This is the world that seems like a dream. Exactly. So based on personal experience, they certainly, they seem intelligent and conscious. They seem more intelligent than us, but as to whether that's a projection of our minds or, a simulation or who knows? I mean, it's a profound mystery, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the popularity of DMT and everything, I'm only going by what I hear. And yes, it's basically through Joe Rogan, because he's one of the biggest advocates for it. It sounds like when he discusses it, everybody, it doesn't matter who they are, always speak of the same type of entities, though.
Yeah, it's not necessarily always the same entities, but we cataloged in our book 25 different of the most common entities, because there's a lot of them that people do, very commonly encountered. But I mean, really, there's hundreds of different entities that people describe. It's not like they always, but some of the most common entities are like what they term the self-transforming machine elves, the gray aliens that people report also in the alien abduction reports, fairies, like the fairy sightings are reported. Reptilian type beings, octopus type beings, clowns and jesters are commonly reported. Yeah, so I mean, it's why these types of beings are so commonly encountered is, like, again, it's a profound mystery. We really don't know. Are they archetypes and what Jung would have called the collective unconscious, or are they corresponding to some type of genuine interdimensional species that we're on the verge of being able to catalog in a more biological way.
Yeah, so I guess to your question, as far as working with that with people, when people have those type of experiences, the approach is very similar to what David was talking about. It's one of those situations where it's a recurring experience that many people have. There are many overlaps or very many similarities, either in the entities that are experienced or what that experience may look like. But it also goes back to what I mentioned earlier in terms of not trying to make too much meaning right away out of the experience, and approaching it with a bit of an openness, a receptivity to the experience and what might develop out of that. So, you don't necessarily have to adhere to a perspective that it is, an external entity that is on another dimension that we're getting access to, or you don't necessarily have to immediately subscribe to this as a part of my psyche that is being brought up and presenting itself as this particular archetype. But we tend to focus more on what insight might be brought out of that experience, more so than what these entities actually are. At least until we can do more research and get more information about it and maybe have a better idea.
And right now going on is the extended state DMT trials.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah, at the Imperial College in London. Because normally a DMT is naturally found in the human body. It's not actually a drug. It's endogenous to the human system. It's probably a neurotransmitter of some kind. Although we don't know what function it serves. We have no idea. That's another mystery. DMT is found in every animal. It's found in every mammal. It's found in many plants. And no biochemist has any idea what function it serves in any of these places. So it's really a profound mystery.
We're learning not exactly the same, but similar questions that are now coming up around psilocybin as well, and its strong association to the serotonin receptors, the 2A receptor in particular. Some of the more recent papers just in the last few years are taking a look at how molecularly almost identical psilocin, the metabolite of psilocybin, is to serotonin. And there's speculation that the serotonin system that our brain has developed, serotonin, the neurotransmitter as we understand it now, might not actually be the original ligand that the system was built out of, but it may have been an adaptation of a relationship with psilocybin mushrooms.
Right.
Yeah, and let me just also, I was going to say about the DMTX trials that are going on. DMT is because it's naturally found in the body, the body's able to metabolize it extremely quickly. Mm-hmm. So the experience only lasts, 5 or 10 minutes, which is why, when people do it in an ayahuasca brew, they do it with an MAO or a monoamine oxidase, inhibitor, which prevents the breakdown so quickly. But when you smoke DMT or vaporize it or do it in the kind of concentrations that allow people to sort of enter into what people call hyperspace, where they kind of leave this world and enter into another dimension, that experience usually only lasts 5 or 10 minutes. And what they're doing at the Imperial College in London and around 5 other places around the world is they're using a kind of a kind of intravenous system where they're sort of keeping the levels constant in their blood, so they can stay in this state for extended periods of time, for a half an hour, or potentially much longer. So this will give us greater opportunity to be able to dialogue with these entities and be able to see if there's really some kind of reality to this. I don't know what the proof would be, but if we can come back with some kind of new scientific knowledge or technological blueprints to create starships or time machines or matter transporters or new forms of energy, or I don't know what kind of science fiction technologies could come out of it, but that would constitute some type of genuine evidence that these entities really have an independent existence.
Right. It's very interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Doug, how do you administer it? I guess.
How do we administer it?
Yeah.
So we work exclusively with psilocybin over here in Oregon. That's what's legalized, and that's what we're able to get people access to. So it's either dried mushrooms, dried fruiting body. Some of it comes as a homogenized powder form, and we're usually at this point, most people are pairing that with orange juice or lemon juice because it helps metabolize the mushrooms faster, so it's less demand on the system. But now we've got a couple companies that are making gummies and chocolates.
Oh wow! Okay. So how long does that normally last for?
It's usually, depending on the dose, 4 or 5 hours or so.
Okay.
But I mean, individual metabolism definitely varies. I've had some people who metabolize it particularly quickly. I mean, psilocybin as a whole is metabolized pretty quickly. Most of it's out of your system by the time your trip is done. But the actual trip itself, some people will come out of it 2-3 hours. It's relatively short. And we've had some people that are slow metabolizers, and they've had 10-11 hour journeys. So it's one of those things. When I'm working with people, we set aside the whole day just in case.
Oh yeah, right. Awesome. Anybody have any questions?
I do,
Go for it.
and it's for everyone. If you guys do your own spiritual practices, have you found that you have been able to hit those points through your own practices without the assistance of these with these drugs?
Yes.
If so, if you can share.
You can. There's certain breathing techniques through the nostrils that you can do to enter certain states of samadhi. There's different ways to enter into these different mind states, and a lot of, I think, when you look at the drug angle of it, it's the quick way to open the door. And a lot of times once you open the door, like Aldous Huxley says, those are the doors of perception. And once those doors are open, then they remain open. So it's a matter of training your brain through some of these extemporaneous, processes to be able to recreate those without the use of substances. So it can be, it can be done for sure.
The most powerful technique that I know of for being able to access these other states of consciousness is through what's called lucid dreaming, or the practice of becoming conscious and aware in your dreams, so that you wake up in the dream and you realize that you're dreaming while it's actually happening.
Yes.
And then you can actually act within the dream. And one of the amazing things is that when you're inside of a dream, you can do a drug. You can do whatever. You can do cannabis or LSD in the dream, and they have the real effects in the dream.
Yes.
So that's certainly a way of actually experiencing this without actually doing any physical drugs. But it really works. I've done it many, many times, and it's a very, very powerful technique, and it's something anybody can learn. There's just go online and look at the basic techniques. I don't have time to go into them right now, but in another future podcast, if you're interested, I'd be happy to explain the different techniques for lucid dreaming. But they're a very, very powerful way of accessing these different states of consciousness without drugs.
And do you think when you enter into those lucid dream states that your body is taking advantage of the androgynous substances your own system produces? Because
it's a great question. I'm sorry, go on.
Oh, I've just noticed when I have become lucid in my dreams that everything becomes brighter, and I get a feeling that starts in the head and moves down. That's almost electric. So I think that I think that in combination with the mental processes, I think there's also some sort of a physical switch that your body may be participating with as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very likely. I mean, there hasn't been any research done in this at all. But yeah, I think it's a fascinating question, and it would be wonderful in the future to really explore that in greater depth.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the book, we talk about that as well. Psychedelics can work as it's a fairly easily, reliably reproducible catalyst for these altered states of consciousness. But there have been practices cross-culturally around the world for a very, very long time that allow somebody to develop or reach these non-ordinary states of consciousness. So meditation, for sure. They've found that the neural correlates, what's going on in the brain in meditative states, has a lot of similarity with some of the drug-induced states. So that the psychedelics happen to be a realm that Rachel and I work within, but my own journey working with these and my exploration, while psychedelics were an early influence, it's rarely personally work with psychedelics anymore because I've found the other ways to be able to access this. So working with meditation, the alternating nostril breathing or pranayama breathing practices, holotropic breath work, developed by Stanislav Groth, is an incredibly potent way to just alter your breathing and reach these states with something that you don't have to ingest. You don't have to take anything in. It's completely free. It's an awareness and a development of your own body to be able to reach these states. And again, ritual and ceremonial practices and those sorts of things are all also geared toward immersing yourself or developing states of gnosis to be able to tap into these. And again, the neurobiological correlates of what's going on in those states, the same sort of things are happening. So the deep meditative states, holotropic breathwork has been shown to do many of the same things that like your classical serotonergic LSD psilocybin is doing. Or there's technological ways to do it now. So there's things like the God machine that stimulates different areas of your brain and can bring on these mystical non-dual states.
I want to try one of those.
Well, I saw an interview with a Buddhist monk, and they actually, used the God machine, the helmet, and he said that brings you instantly to what I've been working like 15, 16 years to be able to do with my own brain. It is very interesting when you start getting into these mechanical, electrical phenomena incorporated with and that's where you get into Timothy Leary there towards the end. I saw one of his lectures where he was talking about the digital mindscape in regard to the merger of the digital and the human phenomena per se, to take you even to higher potential levels.
The virtual reality work and
right.
There's research at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, lucid dreaming research, where they used a transcranial brain stimulation. They put this little band around people's heads, and when people are dreaming, the transcranial brain stimulation activates the prefrontal cortex, and that basically triggers lucid dream activity in people who are just dreaming. So that's a technology that is being miniaturized and mass-produced, and it won't be long before we have little headbands you can wear when you go to sleep that allow you to lucid dream on command.
Right.
Doug, were you going to say something about like neurogen or acupuncture?
I certainly can. Sure, those are other tools that I utilize in a couple different realms within my clinical practice. I've done some exploration of acupuncture as a means of non-invasive brain stimulation. So acupuncture over the scalp or use of photobiomodulation, cold lasers, stimulate different areas of the brain. So you can gear that in a very similar way, though it's more subtle, to stimulating those areas of the brain that can induce those states. So inducing altered states of consciousness through that. People who may have familiarity with acupuncture knows that you can get kind of acu-drunk, as it were, or you get into this very relaxed, endorphin-rich state where you can feel in an altered state. And the neurogen brain balancing is a form of non-invasive brain stimulation or neurobiomodulation that takes a real-time EEG reading through different nodes that are put over the scalp. It reads what your brain is doing and creates an adaptive frequency in real time that sends a signal back to bring your brain back into coherence. And again, you can create protocols based on understandings of neuroscience and different brain networks in order to modulate those or create change or alterations in those brain networks too. And that's a really interesting one because it's real-time adaptive. So it's taking a reading of exactly what your brain is doing and then sending a frequency back, a signal back, and your brain's response to that frequency and that signal is then read by the EEG, and it's just this feedback loop that's bringing your brain into a particular state of coherence. There are just other tools that can be brought into this exploration of consciousness.
Well, and also learning to control those loops.
Yeah.
As far as leveling them up or leveling them down through the conscious effort of noticing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's what, conventional neurofeedback is typically doing. You've got an EEG reading and you've got a screen or an audio tone that you're working with. And with the neurogen, even though it's completely passive, so you don't have to do that. The system is doing everything for you. You are able to see on the screen what your brain is doing, how it's responding, and you can play with that. You can toy with that, and you can enhance your ability to, change your own brain.
Right. And I mean, this just walks you right down the road of frequency and Reiki and all the different waveform vibrations that affect the body on subtle forms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Anybody else got anything? You guys good? Okay. I guess if you wanted to probably wrap it up a little bit soon, but I wanted to ask each one of you if you could what would you like to say about this program that you think it can, what would you like to leave people with this with the idea of this and what it can do for people?
Sure. I can start in that, this is something, the model itself is something that I've utilized, throughout my professional career in different ways and understanding of where people are coming from. A big component of that is sort of neurological imprints that happen early in life. So if we have a significant life event early in life, early life trauma or something like that, that can be very tied into a particular developmental phase. And we can say that they have a very strong imprint in circuit 1 and that relationship with their body or attachment. And so being able to work with somebody with where they're at, but also with the psychedelic realm or the non-ordinary states of consciousness, being able to have a framework to be able to have an understanding, because a lot of people will have spontaneous experiences. They don't have any sort of framework to talk about that. And that's one of the big places that this comes into play. This model that can be really helpful is being able to have the language and the understanding that these experiences that don't often get talked about, often get shoved to the side or dismissed, that it's something that's many, many people have had access to. Some people have greater access than others. And a lot of our goal with this is to both inform people who may have these experiences, and then professionals that are working with people that may have had these experiences but also don't have the framework with that. So like my psilocybin facilitation training, there was a recognition that people are having these experiences, entity encounters, transgenerational experiences, unitive experiences, but then you recognize that it happens, but what do you do with it? Like, how do you navigate that? How do you discuss it? And how do you help people work through that experience? And that's really been much of the goal of this work, and what we're steering toward and developing training programs and everything like that, is so that people are more informed about these types of intelligence that everybody has access to, but not everybody has access to them, and what to do with that.
So I'll bring it back to Tim Leary, the quote, "Think for yourself, question authority." And I just feel like we're in such a strange time in history, especially with social media and psyops and propaganda and just this constant bombardment of different messages and different agendas. And so to really be able to question, as David would call it, your BS, your belief systems. And, as a therapist, something that comes up like almost with every client is this lack of a sense of self, like sort of this constant need for external validation, constantly comparing yourself to other people, feeling the need to conform. So it's being able to have a tool that really encourages you to strip away all the BS and really find your true self and to live an authentic life and bring your gifts into the world and live fully. So I think like this is such an amazing tool, using psychedelics potentially as a means to catalyze that, but in and of itself, for just deeper self-exploration. And if everybody in the world was to really go into this kind of a process, how much of a better world this potentially could be.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of my vision for my idealistic vision for the use of it.
Thank you. David?
I'm not really sure what I could add, but just that if people are more interested in learning more about the Eighth Circuit model, besides Rachel and Doug's wonderful book, the Timothy Leary's Exopsychology, Robert Anton Wilson's Prometheus Rising, and Antero Ali's Angel Tech are probably three of the best books that you can get a foundation for understanding this on. And and I think that this can be really helpful as we're, as artificial intelligence is increasing and we're moving into what, Ray Kurzweil called the singularity, where computer intelligence is rapidly becoming more intelligent than human beings. And I think that having a psychedelic perspective is very important at this time in history, primarily because it raises ecological awareness. And I don't think there's anything more important right now than raising ecological awareness during our climate crisis. I just wanted to mention one other thing here. As my friend Sarah likes to say, I'm going to be real with you. Early this morning, I did some magic mushrooms and totally forgot about this podcast. And it wasn't until Rachel reminded me half an hour after I did it, and I was like, "Oh my God, I forgot we got to do a podcast today." So I don't know that I was the most articulate today, and I apologize if I wasn't. But I did my best. But you guys have the honor of this was the only podcast I've ever done tripping on magic mushrooms. So there you go.
I had no clue.
Real quick.
You were very articulate. So
Yes, very articulate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. One thing I did want to ask too. I think I kind of got out of it. This is something I think it even falls into the occult and magic, depending on how you're practicing it. Do you think with this you can actually kind of reprogram yourself? Right? Do you think that's possible?
Oh yeah. Oh,
that's
absolutely.
the whole idea, really.
Yeah, that's what I
thought.
thought.
Well, and it's deprogramming as far as letting go of the artificiality, like Dr. Rachel, like you were talking about, coming to know your true self, and letting the things within your true loves and interests shine, for the world to see. And I think that is the great stepping away. It's like Terence McKenna talks about, culture it's like a petri dish, and it's like growing and it's doing its own, and you want to step away from the culture and be the true essence of the self. And that requires going through these phases of understanding and these levels of knowing yourself. And it's a lifelong process, It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's right in the subtitle of the book, Metaprogramming the Multidimensional Self. The idea is this different steps of sort of deconditioning or increasing your awareness so that you have the ability to look at those portions of self that have dictated how you perceive reality or navigate the world, and being able to sort of deconstruct those and recreate, or if you want to look at it as reprogram, the way that you're able to look at things and navigate things.
Right.
I can add something about imprint vulnerability to that. The famous ethologist Konrad Lorenz did a study many years ago where he showed that when baby ducklings first hatch, that the very first thing they see, they imprint as their mother. It's usually the actual mother duck. But he noticed that if they saw him instead of the mother duck, they would follow him around, and they would follow whoever around that they first saw when they first hatched. And what Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson did was apply this to human development. That as each circuit sort of comes into being developmentally, there's a period of what we call imprint vulnerability, where the circumstances that you're in at that time, the environment that you're in, in a positive or negative way, affect your orientation with that particular circuit, and then that kind of sticks for life unless you make new imprints. And for most people, they never make new imprints. But what psychedelics do is they allow people to suspend their previous imprints and then make new ones, and hopefully better ones.
Better ones, yes.
And that was actually backed up by Catherine McLean, the neuroscientist. She did some studies on psilocybin and found that because it used to be believed that around age 30-ish, the personality was crystallized. And so you were kind of like, this is who you are for forevermore. And so with psilocybin, it sort of loosened the rigidity of those crystallized structures, and that you were able to then kind of re-imprint and, this, other versions of yourself as you gain whatever insight you might have had, experience of awe, beauty, God, and so it helps you really loosen those boundaries.
And then bringing it back to kind of the theme of the podcast as a whole, that's where the ritual, the ceremonial work, the occult practices have also come into play. Different approaches to being able to do that.
What would be what are some of the ones that you know of when it comes to occult practices? That I was thinking of sigils possibly as being used to imprint.
Yeah, absolutely. We really briefly talk about sigil work in relationship to Circuit 6 and meta-awareness and an ability to externally project an intention and then root that or seed that in the subconscious so that you're subconsciously manifesting that. And that's absolutely that feedback loop of increasing that awareness, but working on such a subtle level that it's not right there in your conscious awareness. So sigil work certainly comes into play.
Nice. Yeah, I assumed. I don't know. Just makes sense to me. Anybody have any questions before we wrap it up? I'm kind of out for now, unfortunately. I have no problem, but I have no more questions.
I thought it was a pretty good coverage of the topic.
Yeah. I'll tell you one thing. I would like to. Even if I get you all on separately on something else, I think I would love to get you all back on the show at some point. I think you'll have some really interesting stuff to talk about and experiences, and research. Definitely got me interested.
Yeah, it'd be great to come back on the show. And me and Rachel just completed an oracle deck for Inner Traditions that's based on the 8th Circuit model and based on the DMT entities. So when that comes out, we'd love to do a show with you about that.
Nice. They actually normally send me people, so I'll let them know. I'll take you guys on. I'll let them know. Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, hell yeah, that would be awesome. Definitely. And I would definitely get you on for the lucid dreaming too in the future. So
cool. Yeah,
we'll all definitely be keeping in touch if that's okay. Please, everybody, Doug, please let everybody know where they can find your stuff. Or what you would like to promote, or whatever.
Yeah. Most of our material around the 8th Circuit model can be found at 8thCircuitAscension.com. So all of our books, we've got some related books that tie in some of the I guess what you'd consider mythopoetic or archetypal systems that are out there. So Tarot, the Ruin system, the I Ching. So we've got some additional materials beyond our base book. Like I mentioned, the workbook's going to be coming out pretty soon here. Not exactly, we don't have an exact publication date yet, but very, very quickly. We just sent off the last edits there. So that's where you would go for most of our material, is at 8circuitascension.com. We're developing out training programs and continuing education courses, and also for the psychonautically inclined solo practitioners, being able to work through that material and have access to working through that as well with a little bit of guidance.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Rachel, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Was there anything that you would like to promote or tell people about for your own stuff or anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Doug summed it up and David already summed it up. Those are like the primary things that, have been the focus of my life, have been like this workbook and the courses and the Oracle deck with David. So super exciting things coming down the pike. But yeah, that's
awesome. All right. Thank you. And David, did you want to promote any of your other books or anything? Or
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is my latest book, the Illustrated Field Guide to the DMT Entities, which was illustrated by our friend Sarah Finn Huntley and around 25 other artists, including Alex Gray and Luke Brown and others. And that's sort of based on a field guide idea of the entities, like we did discussed. To find out more about my work, my website is David J. Brown, Jay, brown.com. And there's a collection of many of my interviews. I've done over a couple hundred interviews with different leading edge thinkers, everyone from Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson to Rupert Sheldrake and Albert Hoffman and Jerry Garcia and Noam Chomsky, and just many, many dozens of brilliant minds, and asked them questions that they normally don't get asked about God and consciousness and life after death and things like that. You can find many of those. You can find me on Facebook easily. You can find me on Instagram. And if you go on Amazon and put my name in, you'll see my sales page with the 20 books that I've written about the evolution of consciousness. And anybody has questions who wants to contact me can easily do through Facebook or Instagram.
Awesome. Wow. That's great. Out of all those 100 interviews, this is the only one you did tripping.
Yes. Only one.
That's awesome. Thank you. I mean, especially
and I wasn't planning on it either, but
there you go. Gotcha. No, thank you all very, very much. Again, this was a really interesting episode. A lot of interesting stuff. Judith, real quick, let everybody know where they can find you as well.
Oh, sure. First, to the three guests, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the work you're doing. It's going to be, how can I say this? It's going to rock the world once everybody starts accepting this. I honestly do believe it's going to make a difference, a huge difference, a most needed difference. So thank you for your work, and thank you for coming on. Nick, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
And you can find me on YouTube on As the Loon, and you can find me on X, where I post all the time and I share all the Occult Rejects shows I go on live on X, and I am the Loon at the Loon 50. And I thank you again.
Oh, yeah, no, thank you. Robbie Marks, please, sir.
Yes, thank you for having me on. It was great talking with you, Dr. Doug, Dr. Rachel, David, some great stories. I'm very interested in picking up the DMT book, but I would like to say that I am Robbie Marks, artist illustrator, and go check out my Linktree, which is Linktree RMARX, and that'll pull up my podcast, the Meta Mindcast, as well as all my social media, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, this was a great talk. Good hanging out.
Oh yeah, thank you, Robbie. I really appreciate you making it. And,
for sure.
Yeah, that was a great show, and like I said again, hopefully I get you all back on at some other point. It was some really interesting stuff. And that's the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.